Hello and welcome to Original Soundchat, where video game music is a work of art. On each episode, it's our goal to help you learn about 2 soundtracks from the world of games, as well as the people, stories, and critical tracks behind them. My name is DeVader.
And I'm Peter Spezia. We're brought to you by Anonymous Dinosaur and Rhymes with Asia. It's time to appreciate great OSTs and the games that they come from, without getting too bogged down in music theory. Joe, what are this week's games?
Up first is 2019's The Somnium Files, the investigation of a serial killer who takes their victims' left eyes by a police officer who doesn't know his past, and his AI partner solving the case by entering other people's dreams.
Following that is the return of the Nonary Game, where 9 contestants must solve escape room puzzles and put their lives on the line, with a new twist of allying with or betraying their teammates. 2012's Zero Escape, Virtue's Last Reward. Oh yeah, they're weird titles, alright, but they're also titles that are written and directed by one Kotaro Uchikoshi, and that is the theme for this week's episode.
He's weird. He's really weird. We'll get into more of his weirdness in a bit, but he's an odd dude.
He is an odd dude. That's a good way to put it. Certainly coming out just after the Somnium Files sequel, Nirvana Initiative, just came out. And so that's kind of the inspiration to do it. I've been meaning to talk about Zero Escape Virtue's Last Reward for a long time, especially, it was like episode 40 or something like that, I think, that we talked about. 9 Hours, 9 Persons, 9 Doors, the original in that series. But yeah, it took a while to peg down talking about someone else other than Shinji Hosoe. But yeah, should be a good episode. Been looking forward to talking about these games on the show. Joe, how are you doing? What are you playing?
It's pretty much just been Nirvana Initiative.
Nice.
I've gotten through one route, and I'm pretty well into the second route on the Ryuki side. The way it has 2 playable characters, and the way it separates the 2, at least the way I think it's going to work, based on what I've played so far, is really clever. A very clever way of making sure that you play the routes essentially in a loose order that they want you to. So I'm looking forward to getting into more of that. And that's basically it. I haven't really been playing anything else. It's not been a very big video game. I guess I played another Kingdom Hearts 2 randomizer. I streamed for 9 hours.
Woo.
Yesterday at time of recording, which was not the plan, but I blinked and it had been 9 hours. And yeah, that was fun. You can go check that stream out at twitch.tv/Nintendo World Report. The VOD should still be on there, and it'll be on YouTube at some point as well. So,
and while you're at it, also SGDQ is happening right now for this week. So go check out gamesdonequick.com, check out some good speedruns, and donate to their good causes. I think they're doing Doctors Without Borders this year, so or this time around, I guess. It's always one of those things where it's like Games Done Quick, GDQ always comes around like, oh, it's suddenly this week, and it's like, yeah, every 6 months, like clockwork, come on, but always a good time for that.
Yeah, every time it sneaks. I had no idea SGDQ was happening until it started. So
exactly, yeah,
every time.
Amazing. I am about done with Mass Effect 3 on my Perfect Paragon Shepherd for it's Obama. So it's Obama Shepherd, and it's a really good Obama construction of his face. It's funny. Yeah, so I just got to the point where it's like they're kind of teasing like the point of no return with the Cerberus base. So I'm like, I better do the Citadel DLC that's included. So I'm pretty much right at the end. It's like 20-ish hours in. I always think that like Mass Effect 3 is bigger than it is, but it moves along at a pretty good clip if you know what you're doing. Also, if you play on an easier difficulty. And, then my next game may be The Somnium Files. That's all I'll talk about. It's been sitting pretty high up in my Games Pass queue for a while. And you know what? This may just push me over the edge there.
Yeah, it's a good game, and I enjoyed it quite a bit, and the sequel so far is very good.
That is great to hear. Not too much on the game news front this week. Actually, as of time of this episode's release, the morning of when this episode's released, there's a Nintendo Partner Mini Direct. So they're saying for 25 minutes there'll be news about third-party games for Nintendo Switch. We're literally recording the evening before. Not too much else news going on, but let's speculate a little bit. Joe, what do you expect to see in this Partner Mini in a quickly sure to go wrong and be outdated little discussion?
I am holding out hope for Persona. I think there's a very good chance we see Persona. I'm also not going to hold my breath for Persona.
Yeah, if you get 3, 4, 5 on Switch, if you don't get it here, it could easily be and one more thing at the concert that's coming up in several months. I mean, big in Japan, they could also have it at that sort of event. But yeah, could happen. It looks like there's one story that is already out there. Ubisoft decided to leak Mario plus Rabbids Sparks of Hope again. It looks like their release date is looking to be October 20th if a Spanish-speaking storefront is to be believed.
It makes you start to wonder if they're doing this on accident or if this is on purpose, because the announcement also went up, I want to say like 4 hours before the Direct aired.
Nothing in a way that makes sense. That's for sure. It's just a strange coincidence there. And then I'm sure we'll see things like, Live Alive. We'll do another trailer. It's coming up soon, within a month or so. So
yeah, that I think there's a pretty good chance of getting at least a good chunk of Live Alive. I don't know. Maybe we'll finally see Final Fantasy 13. There's nothing to back up my feeling on that, but maybe. I don't know. Who knows?
It's just a weird time. I remember when that Partner Mini was like hyped up, like, "Ooh, we got one more game." And then it was that Bakugan game.
Yeah.
So like, it's just a tough thing. Obviously when you're listening to this, it'll be out already. So we'll just have to see. And then let's do some VGM Hurdle before we get into our games. For the last several weeks, you'd like to go to vgm-hurdle.glitch.me to do their take on the Wordle Hurdle phenomenon, where they play, video game music, one song a day, and you have to guess in increments of 1 second, 2 seconds, 4, etc., up until 16 seconds. So far in the show, knock on all the wood, we have not needed more than 1 second, but that may change today. I was kicking myself the other day when I missed Gwyn, Lord of Cinder from Dark Souls.
I also missed that one. I was hearing it just like, I know this song. I know it. What is it?
Same thing exactly for me. I'm like, I'm going to be so mad. And then it ruined my day. It was not fun.
I also want to give a shout out to, we almost recorded this on Friday. And on Friday, the song was a song from the Somnium Files, which would have been hilarious.
Would have been incredible. And I think it's one that's on your Critical 5. So.
It sure is.
We'll get to it. That was also a delight. Joe, are you ready for this installment of VGM Hurdle?
Let's do it.
All right, here is the first second of today's song. Okay, it's Pokemon, obviously. It's from Diamond and Pearl, because it's got that DS sort of sound chip. Let's start typing in Pokemon Diamond, see what they've got. Well, they've got 6. I don't know if they've got more than that.
Oh, I already know exactly which song it is.
Do you think it's Jubilife? No, it's Route 209 because it's from Brawl.
Yep, Route 209. That's the one.
That sure is that song.
Okay, that one wasn't Genova, but I mean, still.
But it is a little interesting that we keep getting songs that we can guess within 1 second. That's usually not how it is. Again, play over at vgm-hurdle.glitch.me and you play every day and try to test your video game music knowledge.
Let me put it this way. The Somnium Files song, I had to go for, I think, 5 seconds before I got it. So
it starts a weird way, and I didn't know it because I hadn't listened to your selections yet. But I thought it was like a Bravely Default song, honestly. And like, oh, they don't have Bravely Default songs here. Well, interesting.
Really? Huh.
Yeah.
All right. Speaking of that, let's jump into the Somnium Files. That's right. You may read the title and think, isn't it AI, the Somnium Files? No. It is pronounced the Somnium Files. We'll get into why in a bit. It was originally released for PC, Switch, and PlayStation 4 on September 17th, 2019 in North America. Weird that we got it first. Came out on September 19th in Japan, and then September 20th in Europe. This does not seem like a game that we would have gotten first, but hey, I guess we did. Xbox One would not get a release of this game until September 30th, 2021. As you mentioned earlier, it is currently on Game Pass, so if you want to play it and you have Game Pass, hey, you have easy access to this game. It was developed and published by Spike Chunsoft. It is a mystery visual novel game where the player takes control of Kaname Date, a special agent of the police branch known as Abyss. That's the Advanced Brain Investigation Squad, ABIS, which is a stretch. Date is investigating a serial killer case. Joining him is his AI partner, Aiba, who lives in an artificial eyeball that is inserted into Date's left eye socket. Hence why her name is Aiba. She's an eyeball. An AI ball.
An AI eye, yep.
It only gets less subtle from there, everybody. Aiba has the ability to use X-ray and thermal vision, as well as powerful hacking and processing skills. She can also communicate non-verbally with Date, and has a direct link up to his optical nerve. So the game is split up into two types of gameplay. The first is just kind of your usual visual novel, very similar to Ace Attorney or something of that kind. You look around an environment from a fixed location, you can examine stuff, you can talk to people in the style of sort of a point-and-click adventure. This can take the form of talking to a member of the supporting cast, such as the boss of Abyss, who is my favorite archetype of character, which is, man, you're super hot and cool, and from everything you say, you are a mess of a human being. I love it. I love it. Basically, it could be talking to people like that, or it can be investigating a crime scene, or just looking around an area in general. Occasionally, there are action scenes, and these are enacted using QTE sequences. That's QuickTime events for people that don't know. Basically, a button will flash on screen, and you have to press it in time, or Date will die. And then you'll have to start the QuickTime event sequence over. None of them are that hard, especially if you're like me, and you play on easy difficulty, because I don't care. I'm not playing this for the challenge. It's a story mystery game. What? The other half of gameplay is Somnium, which is the name given to puzzle sequences that are located within another character's dream. In these, you take direct control of Aiba from third person, and are given 6 minutes to find the methods of unlocking the Somnium's mental locks, which allow her to go deeper into the dream. Time moves when Aiba moves, and performing actions with items found around the environment will also subtract a specific number of seconds from the clock, and this effect can actually be lessened by the use of items called timies. So you can get timies from doing specific actions that'll be like, if you use this item, no matter how much time this action is supposed to take, now it will only take 2 seconds, and that kind of thing. And sometimes you need to get the timies, or it's impossible to complete the thing, but only a couple of times in the game. As it is an Uchikoshi game, there are multiple routes, and a flowchart is provided to help the player locate where branches are located. Branches happen exclusively within the Somnium sequences, so the flowchart must be filled out almost entirely in order to unlock the game's true ending. The first game has a bit of an issue where Somniums, they take place in dreams. So a lot of the puzzles are kind of based on dream logic. And dream logic isn't consistent between dreams because it's dream logic. And that's, of course, supposed to be part of the challenge, is that you are supposed to sort of figure out what the rules of that specific dream are for yourself. But sometimes the actions you have to perform to cause a branch are really stupid. Like, I'm pretty sure one of the first ones that I got was like, if you kick this thing instead of punching it, it will lead you to a different piece of information, and that's what causes the branch. And there's no indication that that's what will happen. The sequel actually fixes this, by the way, because it gives you a sort of chart, like a line graph sort of thing that shows you how far into the Somnium you are and shows you exactly when a branch is about to occur. So, a lot of quality of life fixes in Nirvana Initiative that I have to applaud. So the story of the Somnium Files: Kaname Date, a police officer with no memories past 6 years ago, is called out one night to investigate the murder of Shoko Nadami, the ex-wife of Date's close friend Renju Okiura. She has been found on the carousel in a local park, her left eye having been removed. Things get more complicated when Date discovers Shoko and Renju's 12-year-old daughter, Mizuki, hiding in the carousel's middle section, clutching the ice pick that possibly killed her mother, and unable to speak as a result of the trauma of finding the body. In order to help her overcome her trauma and give them the information she knows, Date and Aiba connect to her mind using a process known as syncing, that's Psyncing, which allows them to enter the brains of consenting unconscious individuals. This opens the door to an entire serial killer case that begins to be known as the new Cyclops serial killings, due to its similarities to a case from 6 years prior, in which all the victims were found with their left eyes removed. So the questions are, can Date and Aiba find the new Cyclops serial killer before he is able to claim any more victims? What happens when an internet idol and her dorky-obsessed fan become heavily involved in the case? And what is the connection between this case and Date's forgotten past? Peter, this is where I'll ask, what are our experiences with the Somnium Files?
I should have played this game already. I like Uchikoshi's work, even though it can get a little weird and creepy. But, it was his next big project after Zero Escape, and so it's a game I should have gotten to by now. As I mentioned near the top of the show, it's very, very high on my queue list for Game Pass. So I think, especially from what I've heard so far, it's like, yep, this probably should be a game that I get to very soon. So no experience playing. Definitely have seen a lot of characters around. Looking at stuff for the sequel, it's interesting to hear Uchikoshi say that, like, oh, you don't need to have played the first game to appreciate and, be able to play the second one.
So it actively, one of the first things the game does is say, are you familiar with the events of the first game? And if you say yes, it asks you to name 2 people from the true ending.
Oh, interesting. Oh, that's so weird. See, and I think he's done that before with Zero Escape games to say, like, I want better sales. I don't want to isolate people from not buying my game, but, like, you kind of need to play these games. Like, it's really important, actually. So, that doesn't surprise me. So, yeah, I'd like to play this game soon this year.
I played it on Switch. It was my bedtime game for a couple of months. One of the first games I finished this year, I think. I really liked it, other than a few problems, mainly with Date. He's a massive loser. Yeah, I think it's a very worthwhile mystery game. I think the mystery overall is very good. I think getting through all the routes is overall fine. I do recommend, near a certain point, having a walkthrough open just to get yourself onto the other tracks. Because of that dream logic issue. Something I haven't had to do with Nirvana Initiative yet, which is good because there are no walkthroughs, because I was playing the game before it was out, and even now, nobody's beaten it yet. So, or at least nobody's beaten it enough to have set up a walkthrough to tell me what to do. We'll see if that continues.
That definitely makes it tricky, especially we'll get to Zero Escape and its escape room sequences, weird puzzles that deal with some weird pseudoscience sometimes. So yeah, I think there's no shame in having a walkthrough around for an Uchikoshi game.
So, as we have said a couple of times now, the Somnium Files was written and directed by Kotaro Uchikoshi, who had previously made a name for himself writing and directing the Zero Escape series, which, again, more on those later. Reportedly, the budget for Somnium Files was much higher than he had worked with for any of the Zero Escape games, and for this reason, he was able to sort of according to him, expressed the concepts that he had in mind for the project in a bit more of a clear manner than he'd ever had a chance to with Zero Escape. According to him, I'm not 100% certain what that means, but I could see it.
That actually checks out based on what I've seen of the Somnium Files. Yeah, you have more money, you can do more things with your cutscenes and storytelling than limited experience with 3D modeling, let's say, over there at Spike Chunsoft.
When comparing Zero Escape and Somnium Files, Uchikoshi said that he felt Somnium Files was built more to appeal to fans of adventure games in general. Quote, in contrast to Zero Escape's heavy use of cutscenes. Now, I've only played 999. It was a long time ago. I remember nothing about it, but I don't remember a heavy use of cutscenes being a thing.
In cutscenes, I feel like in that case, it's maybe it's not the right word, just a lot of talking. The Zero Escape series is just a very, very wordy franchise. You'll get some gameplay in there, but otherwise it's a lot of talking. And I feel like that's what he means by cutscenes. Not necessarily in the video animation sense, but just cutscenes in a way to deliver the story beats.
These games don't really shy away from being super talkative. In the sequel, I was talking to a character and selected one of their options for dialogue, and they talked about an abstract pseudoscience concept for, I want to say, 5 full minutes.
That sure is Uchikoshi. Yep.
Like, he and Kojima must get along so much. Puzzles apparently were intentionally made easier in Somnium Files than they were in Zero Escape. Uchikoshi referred to it as, quote, a modern take on the style of Hideo Kojima's 1994 adventure game, Policenauts. So there's another reason they'd probably get along really well. The other inspirations that he mentions include Life is Strange, Detroit Become Human, Heavy Rain, and Telltale's The Walking Dead. All Western games.
Yeah, and all the more reason why I need to play this game. Okay, all right.
I find it very interesting because I know that, like, it's not as bad as it used to be, where Japan and the Western industries were kind of just, they didn't really look at each other. Well, the Western side looked at Japan, but Japan didn't really go the other way.
Right.
So it's kind of really interesting to read one where it's like, yeah, this was inspired by all these Western titles.
Yeah, totally even looks that way, like it's definitely inspired by those games. So that is really interesting.
So why is it pronounced I, the Somnium Files, and not AI, the Somnium Files? According to Uchikoshi, the theme of the game is different types and expressions of love, as I is the Japanese word for love, but it's also the English abbreviation for artificial intelligence. But it is also pronounced as I, as in the English self-referential pronoun.
Oh my god.
He is not subtle about the eye symbolism in this game. When you go into a Somnium, you go into this weird eye-shaped, trippy sort of kaleidoscope effect. There is a major character in the game named Iris. She talks a lot about Egyptian mythology and, you know, that one eye symbol that we all know.
Mm-hmm.
The killer takes his victim's eyes. Aiba is named Aiba and is in the form of a prosthetic eyeball.
Oh, that didn't even occur to me. Oh my gosh. He's the Aiba.
Yep.
Okay, all right. Yeah, sure.
He doesn't try. He does not try to be subtle in any way, shape, or form. It is reading the logs in Death Stranding levels of, oh my god, all you had to do was name a character. He takes that concept and he runs with it. As for Somnium, Uchikoshi actually learned that this was the Latin word for dream, and also just sort of ran with that. Apparently, producer Yasuhiro Izuki is the one who suggested the idea of solving cases by entering somebody's dream, and the concept moved forward from there.
It makes me think of Capcom's 2013 game, or rather it was Don't Nod, before Life is Strange, but published by Capcom. We talked about Remember Me and its soundtrack composed by Olivier Derivière. That was a game about going into people's memories and kind of hijacking and twisting things and finding and learning things from there. So it makes me wonder how that's kind of developed from that game. That's an interesting thought.
Maybe. The first tease of the game was at GDC 2017 with a piece of artwork depicting an eye. Again, not even trying to be subtle, even before the game came out. It was under the working title Project Sync, and on January of 2019, I did not know this, Spike Chunsoft began promoting the game with a YouTube and Twitter account for the in-game Internet Idol character Iris. Fun fact I did not know, apparently various Easter eggs and snippets from both series imply that the Somnium Files takes place in the same universe as Danganronpa. Do with that information what you will.
Danganronpa also has like trophy names and a couple other references to Zero Escape, so that's really interesting. They're all a bunch of Spike Chunsoft buddies there.
Apparently. So, Somnium Files was received generally well upon release. The Switch version has an 86 on Metacritic. PS4 is at 78, so it didn't do quite as good. The writing, voice acting, and puzzle design of the Somniums was praised extensively by critics, but a lot of critics sort of knocked some points off, pointing to some of the game's more crass jokes.
Yep.
And the fact that Kaname Date is a loser. Possibly more of a loser than they intended. There's a running gag in the game that Aiba has learned that if she tells Date that there is a porn magazine on the ground, he will duck down to avoid a bullet way faster than if she tells him, hey, duck, you're being shot at. And in the sequel, I've already seen a scene of him reading a porn magazine and literally going Super Saiyan, which was a thing. He's a massive loser. He's voiced very well, though. And he is, in my opinion, the weakest part of the game, but he's always attached to Aiba, and Aiba's great, so it evens out, at the very least. Somnium Files, though, did not exactly sell gangbusters, though it was apparently one of the higher-selling new releases on Steam during its debut month, which I find interesting. It did not have a big awards presence. The only nomination for any award that I could find was being nominated for Best Adventure Game at the Famitsu Dengeki Game Awards 2019. As we have mentioned a few times, a sequel released last week on June 24th, 2022, the Somnium Files Nirvana Initiative. It follows both a new character, another Abyss agent named Ryuki, and his AI ball Tama, as well as a now 18-year-old Mizuki who is now working alongside Aiba. So, yeah, I haven't played a lot as Mizuki because it's split into two characters, and pretty much all of my gameplay almost has been Ryuki so far. Tama, I don't know how I feel about her because she is... It's very obvious why she is in the game. She's a fine character, but also, yeah, there's a certain demographic they're aiming for there. And while I am technically part of that demographic, I don't know, it's weird. It makes me, I don't know how to feel about her. She's fine. Now, we're going to talk about a vocalist for this game. We're going to focus on Nao Shiraki. Unfortunately, not a lot of information about her, but she was born on December 30th in Ishikawa, Japan. Year unknown. You can actually follow her on Twitter at Shiro Nao. That's ShiroShironao. Though, be aware, it is entirely in Japanese. She does not tweet in English at all. She's actually a voice actress. She's a Japanese voice actress who's been in various anime and a few video games here and there, but this actually appears to be her first time providing vocals for a game because she is the spoken and singing voice of Iris Sagan, the Internet Idol character. but I could not find much more information on her. In terms of what she has been in, she's fairly new to the industry, it seems, but these are some of the anime and games that jumped out at me as being familiar, including The Ancient Magus Bride, Cells at Work, A Certain Scientific Railgun, Love Live Sunshine, The Promised Neverland, and then 3 games being Exile Election, Blue Reflection, and she is also the Japanese voice of Shanna and Florina in Fire Emblem Heroes. The soundtrack, of course, was composed by Keisuke Ito, who we've actually talked about in the past. We talked about him on episode 154 for his work on Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, but it does feature performances or a performance by now Shiraki, Jackie Lastra, Mari Matsubara, Tomoyoshi Sasaki, Akari Kito, Tomoyo Kurosawa, Natsume Fujiwara, Yuko Kaida, Wataru Takagi, Kenta Miyake, Sayaka Ohara, Erica Harlatcher, Karina Boetger, Zach Aguilar, Allegra Clark, Kaiji Tang, and Dora Fine. Yes, in case you're wondering, that is a large majority of the Japanese and English cast.
Mm-hmm.
It also features some not very good lyrical work by Uchikoshi himself.
Yeah!
We will get to that. And as I said, Miss Shiraki is the Japanese voice of Iris Sagan, both speaking and singing. In English, Iris is voiced by Jackie Lastra, who again provides her singing voice as well. So, let's get into those 5 critical tracks. I think this game has a pretty good soundtrack, and I'm a pretty big fan of it. Let's start with actually my favorite song on the soundtrack. This is critical track number 1, Monzai. For anybody not watching the video version, almost all of the songs on this soundtrack are stylized as what I think are Japanese words. I didn't get a chance to go out and like look up what they mean, but they all contain the letters AI, and every letter in the title is in lowercase except for the A and I. It's kind of interesting. I like that naming scheme. Like I said, this is my personal favorite song on the soundtrack. It usually plays when Date is interrogating a suspect, whether that be on the scene or in the interrogation room. And I don't know, I really, really like the tense sort of atmosphere it brings up. There's another really, really good rearrangement of it in the sequel that is probably my favorite song so far in that game. But when I think of Somnium Files, this is actually the song that comes to mind first.
It's a nice song. It's got, some good synth work going, good bass and then a mid and then a high level. And it kind of all works to create this sort of environment track that I think, definitely works for an interrogation. Like you're kind of trying to figure out like, what's the point of attack on the questioning here? So as I go through these tracks that you've recommended, I keep noticing parallels to different other game franchises, which I think was really interesting. But this one of all of them, it's like, oh, that's the most like Zero Escape. I feel like this is kind of just an enhanced sort of, you get better instruments over time, right? It's like a 7-year difference between the two games. The Zero Escape Virtue/Reward game that I'll talk about is still, it's on 3DS and Vita, so it's still doing the streaming. You're not relying on game hardware anymore, so it's not a huge difference, but it sounds really similar as far as like the use of synths here. So it makes me wonder in a way if Keisuke Ito was kind of like, all right, well, Uchikoshi, what's your previous game work like? Oh, kind of an adventure game that you are solving a mystery. Oh, let's kind of pull from Shinji Hosoe's work a little bit here. I like it a lot too. I think it's a good start and gives you a good vibe right away.
Speaking of vibes, though, let's just kick that out the window and go in an entirely different direction. This is critical track number 2, Appearance of Iris. I've mentioned her a couple of times. Iris Sagan is an incredibly important character in the game's narrative. As I've said, she is an internet idol that goes by the stage name of Aset, which, by the way, is another Egyptian mythology reference, by the way, that is explained in-game.
Set. Yeah. Yep.
But I think this theme really kind of brings across her personality. She's sort of really peppy and optimistic, except for the exact points when, like, a dead body shows up and she's scared and won't talk. That lasts for all of about 20 minutes, and then she's back to her whole thing. She's also super into the occult. That has nothing to do with this song, but it is a thing that she is super into. But my favorite thing about this song is that it doesn't fit with the atmosphere or the game's narrative in any way, shape, or form, which is hilarious. And I really, really like Iris's sort of... She has this presence, much like this song, of just sort of, hi, I'm changing the tone now. I don't care what the tone of this murder mystery is. Now it's this. And I dig that a lot. For people that are watching the video version, in the album art, she's the pink-haired girl. That is Iris.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Yeah, just happy, carefree, and yeah, you're right. That's a very big tone change. Also, it makes me think how Ace Attorney sure did inspire a lot of point-and-click adventures.
Oh yeah, this is an Ace Attorney song for sure.
It's like a character theme straight out of it, and makes you think that for sure. But yeah, I can definitely see how it does not fit with the tone at all. But you know, maybe that's a good thing to kind of add a little bit of levity to it.
She's constantly asking Date to play Shovel Forge with her because they have all these names for these brands that are really funny. My favorite is from the sequel. At one point, a character hands somebody a piece of chocolate and says, "It's a Rorero Fauchère chocolate."
Well, you know, the localization team must have had some fun.
I love it. I absolutely love it. Shovel Forge is pretty good, though.
Mm-hmm.
Following that, we have critical track number 3. Let's get back to some of the more serious stuff. This is Shiraki. This is the song that plays when something is going down, the moment is super tense, Date has to get somewhere fast, or something has happened to somebody, etc. This is probably a close second for my favorite song in the game. I like that it moves a bit further away from the electronic stuff we've heard throughout the other 2 tracks, and is now more orchestrated, sort of. Like, obviously those aren't real violins, obviously, but it gives it this different feel and definitely brings across the vibe of like, yeah, no, there's stakes right now, so good luck.
Definitely a cinematic tension to it, right? I think it does a good job with that while kind of keeping its electronic undercurrent to it. Boy, you know, we were saying that Ujikoshi and Kojima would get along very well because dun 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 dun.
Yep.
Dun dun dun, dun. Like it's Metal Gear as heck on this one. Again, I'm sorry, just pulling in different game series that this soundtrack reminds me of, and that's kind of a good thing. It feels like a really diverse soundtrack, but it also has elements that makes it its own, and I think that's really neat.
I don't think they shy away from the fact that they're constantly referencing other stuff. I've had a character in the sequel refer to himself as specifically the Master of Unlocking 3 separate times. And I expect at some point in the game for him to mention that he was almost a blank sandwich.
Sure. Yep.
Like that has to be coming. But yeah, I would assume that the soundtrack probably isn't too far away from that either. They're very open about stuff that they are referencing and stuff that inspired them and all that sort of thing. So I think it's kind of fitting in this case really to bring up this other stuff that it reminds you of, honestly. Following that, critical track number 4, this is Tekitai. So this music, that is yet another massive sort of rank up, vibe up, I don't know.
Get hype.
Yeah, hype up, there we go. It plays during the action sequences that I mentioned, the QTE sequences, which means you don't hear it very often, but when you do, like, it's very like, all right, let's do this! It's great. I dig it. It's also very Sonic.
It's interesting that you go with Sonic. I was just about to quiz you. Where do you think I'm going on this one? Only one of your favorite video game franchises of all time.
Oh, Persona.
A different Sega franchise.
Different Sega franchise. Yakuza. Oh, okay. No, yeah, I could hear that.
Did Keisuke Ito not talk to Hidenori Shoji? Because this is unbelievably Yakuza. And yeah, if it's in action and like you're almost just expecting to press like heat action buttons along with this. That's kind of how I'm envisioning it. I don't know if that's just crazy, but yeah, it's very, very exciting.
A lot of it, especially in terms, it's very similar to Yakuza in a lot of ways, but there's also like, if Date has to shoot somebody, it puts up like a reticle and you have to move this cursor into the reticle and press the button to fire in a certain amount of time, or there's like directions on the analog sticks and stuff like that. I had one in the sequel recently that had me press in both sticks, which I don't think I ever had to do in the first game.
That's odd. Yep.
So it's very interesting the way it does those. But this song absolutely just kicks it up into high gear. Even when the thing that you're doing is something really stupid, like shooting somebody's bra off of a clothesline so that all the mercenaries shooting at you go, oh, a bra! And then you can kill them. It's, sure thing when that happens. But even then, this song plays and it at least feels cool. And our final track on the Critical 5. This is a song that plays in a thing. This is Invincible Rainbow Arrow Grand Finale. I bet you can't say this about Zero Escape. Either Somnium Files ends on a musical number.
Zero Escape does not.
Yeah, I figured. And I don't mean that's not a spoiler. That is, at the end of the game, most of the cast comes together and performs a musical number together.
How does it rank compared to something like Balan Wonderland?
It's at least better than that.
Okay.
But there's also, the Japanese version, obviously, is the one that played in the clip. There's also an English version, hence why I mentioned the entire English cast up earlier. There is also, this is in universe, a song written by Iris and performed by Iris. So there is a solo version with just now Shiraki singing it. But the grand finale version has everybody sing it. That includes Date, that includes a bunch of other characters. The English version's lyrics are really stupid.
Uh-oh, this is the Uchikoshi part, isn't it?
Uchikoshi wrote the lyrics, baby. The song was composed by Ito, but the lyrics were written by Uchikoshi. And that leads me to believe that the Japanese lyrics are probably also really stupid, but the only reason I can handle them a bit more in Japanese is because I don't speak Japanese, and therefore don't know that they're stupid. In English, and this is not to take away from any of the English actors' performances, they're giving it their all, and honestly, it is a very fun sequence. But the lyrics are just really stupid. They're really, really stupid. The sequel has had no less than 3 musical numbers so far.
What?
And I'm not even halfway through it.
Maybe this is what Uchikoshi was talking about, that it allowed him to do more with cutscenes and budget.
It just reminds me of that one interview where Nomura's like, I want to make an entire musical, like a whole musical world in Kingdom Hearts. That's like more than Atlantica, and Yoko Shimabura responded with, you will do that over my dead body.
Yes.
It is a lot, but also this song is very, very important to the series. As you might have heard, appearance of Iris is based on this song, Iris's theme, because again, it is her song. And this is the song that was on VGM Hurdle last Friday, which was almost the answer.
Yeah, so you can kind of hear in like the instrumentation, at least, if you try to ignore the vocals. Like, the kind of instrumentation sounds a little bit Revo-like, and so it, especially the intro, which we don't include in the clip, but it made me think like it's a JRPG. It sounds like a battle theme. It Bravely Default. Like, I just get that kind of opinion from it. But okay, musical number. All right.
Yeah, and I want to stress, when I say that it ends in a musical number, I'm not like disparaging it for that.
Oh, no. There's nothing wrong with that.
It's hilarious, and I will never forget it as long as I live, so mission accomplished. It's just the song is really weird, and it's a really weird thing for a game about catching a serial killer. It's great. I love it. All right, for tracks on the cutting room floor, I got 2. The first is Isai. So this is actually one of the first songs you hear when you start a new game, because this song plays most of the time when you're investigating a crime scene. It's got this sort of gloomy feeling to it, especially fitting the first scene, because when you're looking at the carousel crime scene, it is pouring rain, it is the middle of the night, and everything just sort of sucks, and it's gloomy. And I think this song really gives that sort of vibe really well, of just, somebody is dead, you're the one that gets to look around at them. Whee!
Definitely gets the gloomy vibe, but it's also nice to have piano be like the main instrument to it as well. Also, I like the kind of ticking that's going on kind of in the background of the track, and I feel like that fits well when you think of like going into the Somnium and you're on a time limit and everything's focused on time there. So a good introductory track, I think, to all of this.
So earlier I mentioned the naming scheme of a lot of the tracks on this sort of soundtrack, where it's all lowercase except for the letters AI. Now, when it's music that plays in a Somnium, it is actually the opposite, where all of the letters are in capital except for the letters AI, which you can see in the second cutting room floor track being Sinkin' in the Fountain. So this is another very important piece. There are a few that I even had to leave off of here, but I think this one needed to show up somewhere because it is the song that plays as a Somnium begins, meaning that Aiba has just appeared. It's sort of showing a brief overview of the environment that she's just appeared in. The puzzles haven't actually started yet. You don't know where the mental locks are, all that. And it feels really otherworldly, and it's really bizarre, which is exactly how it should feel if you are stepping into somebody else's dreamscape, because if I stepped into your dreams, they would not make sense to me, and vice versa. That's just how dreams work. So I think this does a really, really good job of putting you in that sort of mindset of this weird, sort of unnatural thing that is occurring.
Absolutely. Mission accomplished for Keisuke Ito. Like, that's exactly what it needs to be, I think, in that sort of landscape environment. Not a whole lot of melodic work, but does a really good job of setting some dissonant tones and some panning and makes you feel like you're in that environment. I like that.
And of course, all the Somniums have their own song that starts playing once you actually start the puzzles, so there's also that. But this one plays at the start of every single one, so
that checks out for an Uchikoshi game too.
So what will I never forget about the Somnium Files? I mean, that musical number is kind of hard to forget. I don't like Date. I'm very glad he is not the main character of the sequel. He appears in the sequel a few times. He's shown up a few times so far, but he is not a major part of the story, and I'm fine with that. Aiba has moved on to... Mizuki is the best character in the game, and the fact that she gets to be the next protagonist that hangs out with Aiba, I'll take that. I'm good with that. I'm fine with that. Because Date sucks. But I think that it's a really, really interesting sort of story. I think the final solution to the case, what it ends up being, is really neat, and I did not predict it before we got to it, but once it was explained, it was like, oh, that suddenly makes sense. Everything makes sense now. What the hell? But also there's a lot of, like, talk about abstract concepts that don't end up being involved at all, or maybe they do. We don't know, because one of them is alternate realities, and all of the routes sort of contradict each other. There's a character that'll die in one route who's not dead in the next route, or all this sort of stuff. It's really weird and jumbled, and I really, really like the conclusion to the mystery. I think it is a lot of fun, and Aiba is great.
Yeah, you need to play the Nonary games. I mean, if you need to do 999 as a refresher, but definitely Virtue's Last Reward. If so many of those things, it's like, yep, that's just Uchikoshi. And if you're not Uchikoshi'd out by the time you get through Nirvana Initiative, I'll highly recommend that you play that, because that's very, very similar in a lot of ways. So I am definitely looking forward to playing the Somnium Files soon. And then we'll see if I can get to Nirvana Initiative by the end of the year.
I look forward to hearing your feelings about Somnium Files. So for our transition, we like to highlight a fan cover, a fan remix. I discovered a channel that I was not previously aware of called Everything Fantasy, who just puts up orchestrated rearrangements of music. And one of the things they did was a Somnium Files suite. 4 movements, each a different piece from the game. And specifically, the clip we're going to use is of the 3rd movement, which rearranges Syurai, which again is the song when things are going down and everything is tense. And I really, really like this song. So please enjoy that, and we will be right back for more weird Uchikoshi time.
Are we ready for more Uchikoshi, baby?
As ready as one could be.
That's about what I was hoping for. So let's talk about a game from the Zero Escape series. And that will be Virtue's Last Reward. Now, we covered 9 Hours, 9 Persons, 9 Doors, the DS game that was retroactively named as the first game in the Zero Escape trilogy. And we talked about that game in episode 40, so way back when.
Way back when.
3 years ago has come around Halloween. Oh my gosh, wow. So yeah, it was added as a Zero Escape 999 title after the fact of the middle game in the franchise being named Zero Escape Virtue's Last Reward, and establishing that as the name for the franchise. Though the sequel isn't named Zero Escape in its title. Oh, it's so weird. So weird. Anyway, Kyokugen Dashutsu ADV Zenin Shibo desu. It basically translates out to Extreme Escape Adventure, Good People Die.
Well, I mean, at least they warn you.
Yeah. Yeah, although I guess this phrase of Zenin Shibo desu can be interpreted as both these good people are going to die, or I want to be or become a good person. So, go nuts, Japanese translations. Anyway, this game with a crazy long title, released in Japan for Nintendo 3DS and PlayStation Vita on February 16th, 2012. North America would get the game as Zero Escape Virtue's Last Reward on these same platforms on October 23rd, 2012, while Europe would have to wait a month later on November 23rd, 2012. Zero Escape, the Nonary games, released in March 2017 on PlayStation 4 and PC. It's an HD remaster compilation of 9 Hours, 9 Persons, 9 Doors, and Virtue's Last Reward, and that released several months after the launch of the trilogy's conclusion. That would be Zero Time Dilemma. The Nonary games finally came to Xbox platforms earlier this year in March 2022, and you can play it now via Game Pass. I think it's also a cloud gaming option if you are a Game Pass Ultimate member.
Which is probably one of those games that works okay on cloud play, I would assume.
Yeah, you don't have any QTEs, you don't have any, intensive controls like platforming or anything like that. So yeah, I think it would work pretty well, especially if you're just lying there in bed, winding down for the night. The game is developed by Chunsoft. Its original release was published by Chunsoft in Japan, Axis Games in North America, and Rising Star Games in Europe. The Nonary games would be published worldwide by Spike Chunsoft, following the merger of these two companies after the fact. It was like a couple months after the Japanese release of this game, Spike and Chunsoft merged into one company. So, Virtue's Last Reward continues the fundamental gameplay of 999, in that it's a visual novel, also with point-and-click adventure gameplay segments. Sounds pretty familiar when we were talking about the Somnium Files, but the point-and-click adventure part, it's focused on the idea of the escape room, in which the player is locked in a self-contained room and must solve puzzles and use acquired objects to find the means to leave the room. Escape rooms certainly exploded in real-life popularity, at least in the before COVID-19 times.
In fact, if I remember correctly, they made a big deal about there being a Zero Escape themed escape room in like California, I want to say.
Yeah, they did do that. But this was a video game that took place before all that. And so if you've been missing your escape room fix in a pandemic sort of era, this could be a game to get you into that. While 999 was structured around players with fixed, identifiable numbers attached to their identities entering numbered doors, Virtue's Last Reward relies on participants playing rounds of a prisoner's dilemma minigame called the AB game to have players gain or lose points in order to reach 9, but not hit 0, and you start at 3. They wear the same watches, same bracelets, but instead of each character having their own fixed number, Everybody starts at 3, and you have to play this AB game to gain or lose points. And while AB is short for ambidex in this world, it also refers to the game's 2 options of ally or betray. See, it's based off of the prisoner's dilemma, so if you have sort of 2 people facing off here, if the 2 opponents both choose ally, each individual gains 2 points. If the 2 opponents each choose betray, no change occurs, no points earned or lost. But if one opponent chooses betray while the other chooses ally, the person who chose betray gains 3 points, while the other opponent who chose ally loses 2 points. And so when it comes to their narrative structure, the 3 options for who to pair up with, as far as solving the escape room puzzles each round, as well as whether to ally or betray them, it creates a whole bunch of timeline variations for how the story can play out. And luckily, like in the Somnium Files, a flowchart exists for you to jump back to key moments in time and continue playing out the story without needless repetition. And so you get to experience the 22 different endings compared to 999's 6 endings.
999 doesn't even have 9 endings? What are you doing, Uchikoshi?
It's kind of a missed opportunity, right? Like, you need to do 2 endings in 999 to get the true ending, but the other ones are just like bad ends. And also a lot of bad ends in this one, too, if you get 22 different endings, my goodness. Though you'll have to pull information from certain endings to access story locks on other routes. So this will help you complete the flowchart and access the true ending. So what is the story of Zero Escape Virtue's Last Reward? In 2028, a man named Sigma wakes up in an elevator after quick flashbacks of being abducted by a hooded, gas mask-wearing figure. Also inside the elevator is a white-haired, no-nonsense girl named Phi. And Phi seems to know Sigma, and they're both wearing watches that they can't remove with the number 3 on them, also stating that they are a pair. An AI rabbit figure appears on a monitor in the elevator, identifying itself as Zero the Third, and saying that it's time to play the Nonary Game, Ambidex Edition. So escape the elevator before it suffers a terrible fall. When they do, Sigma and Phi meet the 7 other participants of the Nonary Game. Tenmyoji, an elderly man, Quark, an energetic young boy, Luna, a kind and quiet woman, Clover, an unpredictable teenaged girl, who was also one of the main participants in the 999 game when she was younger, Alice, a commanding and focused woman, she was also teased in 999's true ending, and K, a man who wears an irremovable full-body suit of armor. Zero the Third then establishes the rules of the Nonary Game. Earn points through the prisoner's dilemma of the AB game after escaping rooms in groups of 3 in order to reach 9 or more points and escape the big number 9 door. But try to do so quickly, because that door will only open once from someone who has 9 points, and only those with 9 points can leave in that brief moment. Also, breaking any rules or reaching 0 points on the watch results in death via drugs injected by the watch. And just for fun, Zero the Third says that its creator and mastermind of the game, the real Zero, is one of the players. Have fun! So the big questions. How do you best navigate the dilemma of whether to ally or betray? Can Sigma discover the true ending and escape through the number 9 door? What is the point of the Nonary Game? And what does the virus known as Radical 6 have to do with all of this? And finally, who is Zero? So Joe, here's where I'll ask you, what are our experiences with Zero Escape, Virtue's Last Reward?
Non-existent. Like we have mentioned a couple times just in this episode, I played 999 a very, very long time ago, like almost 10 years ago at this point.
Oh my gosh, wow.
'Cause that would have been in like 2013. So yeah, it's been a very long time, and I remember almost nothing about it. And I never really got to any of the others. Virtue's Last Reward, I have heard tell, is very good, mostly from you. You've spoken its praises quite a bit since it came out. And I did hear that Zero Time Dilemma is not the best. But yeah, it's a game I think I've meant to get to for a while. But I just, I haven't gotten around to it.
Yeah, then I highly recommend that when you go back to the Nonary games, do give the HD version of 999 a go, at least as a refresher. There will be purists who say, but you lose the aspects of what make the DS version so great, and I get you. But voice acting, HD visuals, and a flowchart you can actually navigate and go back to instead of playing through the whole game again.
Yeah, that was one of the things that stopped me from getting any of the other endings when I played 999 was, I have to play the whole game again.
Oh, God. And you have to get one of the bad endings in order to make your way through to the true ending. Like, you have to play that game at least twice. But if you got a flowchart to jump back to certain moments, it makes it a whole lot easier. So I definitely recommend refreshing yourself at the very least with 999 before you move on to Virtue's Last Reward, because Uchikoshi can say all he wants about you can just play the middle game of this franchise, just start out. No, it's heavily dependent on knowledge of characters and events and the whole concept of the Nonary game from the original 9 Hours, 9 Persons, 9 Doors. So just go and play both. Fortunately, I think the Nonary games as a Zero Escape package is a great experience to go through and really get a good fill of not only a whole bunch of visual novel reading and drama, but also if you like the whole idea of escape rooms and weird scientific theories that go on with solving the puzzles. Like the first game is based off of a whole bunch of numerology and like base, like how to count in different bases. It's a lot of wacky stuff. So yeah, don't feel bad about having a guide by you, but yeah, it's a really interesting series, and I love Virtue's Last Reward. I think that was made it a little disappointing going to Zero Time Dilemma in 2016, and I was like, oh, this is how we're rounding this out. I'm glad he got to make it, because that was touch and go for a little while. But Virtue's Last Reward is a time. It'll probably take you about 40 hours, 30 to 50, depending on your reading speed, how quickly you navigate the puzzles, how much of a completionist you really want to be, because there's like an alternate secret non-canon ending if you get like the difficult ways of solving the escape rooms, if that makes sense. So it's a whole thing, but the narrative is unlike anything I've experienced before or since. It's a time. So, while writer and director Kotaro Uchikoshi's original intention was just to make 9 Hours, 9 Persons, 9 Doors a standalone title, it didn't need anything beyond that. That game had unexpected critical success in North America, and it prompted him to continue the series. But in an attempt to reduce costs, Uchikoshi asked Chunsoft if he could develop Virtue's Last Reward and its eventual sequel simultaneously, as both games would use the same engine and digital assets. And Chunsoft said, yeah, okay, that sounds good. Greenlit production. And so development started with the Nintendo DS in mind.
Ooh.
And the Nintendo 3DS was announced to be right around the corner. So it was assumed that 3D character models would have to be created to take advantage of the 3D visual effect technology of the handheld, as opposed to the 2D sprites that 999 had. So the dev team at Chunsoft struggled with this due to a lack of experience with 3D models. Also, the results of a Japanese survey indicated that players who did not purchase 9 Hours, 9 Persons, 9 Doors thought it looked scary. And so Uchikoshi, quote, didn't have a choice but to tone the suspense down for Virtue's Last Reward, relying a bit more on a more relaxed and exploration-heavy atmosphere of a research building, as opposed to a Titanic-like ship. This game has an amazing English voice cast. Voice acting all over the place, which is pretty amazing for the extensive amount of words that are played out on the screen. So you have an English cast including Karen Strassman, who plays Phi, Laura Bailey, who plays Luna, Liam O'Brien, who is Dio, Tara Platt as Alice, Aaron Fitzgerald as Quark, J.B. Blanc as Tenmyoji, Wendy Lee as Clover, and Travis Willingham as Kay, with Troy Baker making an appearance as a non-canon ending character. Most of these actors also happen to voice characters from Persona 3 and 4. So the big voice actor names in games at the time, really just bringing them all over for just a stellar cast. The game had multiple titles for consideration before Virtue's Last Reward, including Good People Die, Betrayal Cross Just Barely, Want to Be Saved? Then Die, Sigma Control, Lost Escape, Contagious Distrust, Escargot, Human Mode Killer, 9 Mice Bite the Cat, Die by the Sword, Deliberate Betrayal, Just Death, and Sigma and Phi and Tenmyoji and Quark and Alice and Clover and Dio and Luna and Kay are all trapped in Weird Place. Oh no!
That's just a light novel title.
Yeah, there you go. That's the alternate version, the retelling. Strangely, yeah.
I don't know. I'm a big fan of "Want to Be Saved? Then Die." Like it sounds like that sounds like a Tim and Eric skit, or like some stupid skit on the internet that's like a commercial for a lawyer firm or something. But it's like the worst. Yes. Like it's all it reminds me of.
Mm-hmm. I feel like Contagious Distrust is very on the nose with like the themes of the game, but it's also a mouthful and probably doesn't do that well for catchy branding or SEO and all that. So I don't know. If I had to pick one, it might be that. But Virtue's Last Reward is pretty good. Joe, how would you shorten the phrase "I don't know" into one word informally?
I don't know. That's how I usually do it. IUNNO.
Yep, I would agree with you. Unfortunately, the localizer, I think Ben Bateman is his name, in the original pass for the game went with DONNO, Dono, because it's don't know, right? That's a weird little spelling thing in the original pass of the game. But for the Nonary games, for the HD remaster, it was corrected to DUNNO. Also, there is a lot of localization work in the game, not only with the long script, but also navigating Japanese humor and puns and just trying to make it work in English. Though Uchikoshi wrote the game with an English-speaking audience in mind, especially to try and avoid plot-related translation problems.
I know that in Somnium Files, there are a few times where you'll hit a joke and it won't. One of the characters in the sequel is a comedian and he'll tell jokes. And it's like, I'm sure this is a lot funnier in Japanese.
Oh, that's got to be so tough. Yeah, my condolences to the localizer there for sure. Also, when you were playing the 3DS version, there was a glitch that resulted in corrupted save files whenever you saved and quit during specific escape rooms.
Woo!
There was supposedly a patch that fixed it, but then some players still experienced it. So if you somehow go back and play the 3DS version of this game, just don't save and quit during any escape rooms. Just save yourself the trouble. Just do it all in one run. They're pretty short, and you can at least probably put it in sleep mode on 3DS, right? Just don't save and quit. Don't do it.
Sleep mode is the greatest invention video games has ever embraced, ever.
I totally agree. I don't use it on consoles. I don't trust it on consoles. But when you can just close the handheld, yeah, 100%. As he did with 999, Chunsoft released a big spoiler-filled Q&A website for Uchikoshi to just answer any and all questions after Virtue's Last Reward. Among some of the answers were some of the other phenomena and theories that were considered but not included. These would include dissipative system, Monty Hall problem, Gödel's incompleteness theorems, toxoplasmosis, folie à deux, Capgras delusion, Frigoli delusion, Sally Ann test, and Project MK Ultra. And those are just the ones that are not included. As we've kind of referred to, Uchikoshi is big on pseudoscience or scientific theories that play a big part in the roles of the games. We've talked about in 999, the original game, in Zero Escape, was this big concept of the morphogenetic field, where you'd have two people who one could put an idea up in this theoretical idea cloud, and then someone else could pull that idea down from it, despite the fact that they could be miles and miles away, and that would be like the idea of an epiphany. It's pseudoscience nonsense, but this game runs with it like it's fact. Schrodinger's cat, for example, is a huge, huge aspect of this game. So that's more like a philosophical theory, but still, this is the kind of stuff you're working with in this franchise. Also, in this Q&A section, he talks about how one of the characters' favorite video games is Angry Birds. So it's a whole range. The game reviewed very well, with a Metacritic average of 88 on 3DS and 84 on PlayStation Vita. Reviewers praised the story and its mix of horror, drama, and sci-fi, as well as the characters, the implementation of the flowchart, because that was a new thing for this franchise. The escape room gameplay was praised, as well as the extensive and well-performed voice acting. The criticisms were kind of sporadic and there wasn't too much consensus about it, but there were concerns such as an over-reliance on convoluted plot twists, some bland-looking backgrounds, some clunky controls in the escape rooms, and the writing generally making it, quote, one of the slowest and most overwritten adventure games ever made. I get that for sure.
Harsh, though.
I mean, yeah, it's wordy, and when you got to talk about these theories, it gets to be that way. But hey, if that's your kind of game, eat it up for sure. There was no recognition from the big game awards, except for a nomination for Best Narrative from the Game Developers' Choice Awards. Gaming publication accolades that were earned include Game of the Year from Kotaku, Handheld Game of the Year from GameSpot, Best 3DS DS Story from IGN, Best Handheld Exclusive from Game Informer, and Best Story and Best Graphic Adventure from RPG Fan. The Zero Escape series has sold over 500,000 copies worldwide as of July 2018. But it would be shocking if Virtue's Last Reward made up even 20% of that, since the game was a commercial failure in Japan, and it led to a temporary cancellation of that planned sequel that Uchikoshi kind of went in on with the plan of making 2 games there. This was also the first Zero Escape game to be released in Europe, and that's a bad idea for people to play this one first and only. Fans then started Operation Bluebird when it seemed like Zero Escape 3 wouldn't be made. Started online to raise awareness, and eventually development on Zero Escape 3 did resume with an announcement in July 2015 at an Anime Expo panel. I remember watching that and being very excited when the development was continued to be announced on Zero Escape 3, and it'd be released as Zero Time Dilemma, released in 2016, and it wrapped up the franchise. Like we said, it's not the best conclusion to the trilogy. It's definitely a step down. It had its issues. Zero Escape overall is just a niche franchise. Not much longevity beyond it. So Uchikoshi would then go and create a new franchise for Spike Chunsoft, and that would be called the Somnium Files. He also founded 2Kyo Games with Danganronpa creator Kazutaka Kodaka, and they made 2020's World's End Club together.
Which I also heard was unfortunately not the best.
Yeah, I've got it downloaded on my phone, and have not gotten around to that yet. But it seems very much like a Danganronpa mixed with some Uchikoshiness to it, let's just say. So, we talked about composer Shinji Hosoe when we talked about 999, and He is the big musical force behind it. So what else can we talk about? Well, what about the sound director of the game? Let's talk about Ryoma Nakamura. Not much out there besides a Spike Chunsoft profile on Ryoma Nakamura. Nothing really as far as a VGMDB profile. So he's born in Japan. Don't know when, don't know where, don't even know a blood type. What's that about? But he loved games growing up, and he wanted to work in the game industry. But, quote, my parents were quite negative about them, so I didn't say it and thought it quietly in my heart. He first thought about making music for games while playing Ys 2 on PC-88 in junior high, especially thanks to its opening background music. So he started working part-time for debugging at Enix in the mid-90s. I think he worked on Dragon Warrior 3, if his profile was correct there. Then he joined a multimedia production company called Japan Vistech, and he did some sound production for console games there for about 3 years. But the company then withdrew from the game development business. So he said he changed his job to a trendy web designer. A few years later, in the mid-2000s, he heard from a friend who was developing a game with him at the time that Chunsoft was looking for a sound director, and he applied for a return to the game industry. On his profile on Chunsoft's website, he notes that earphones are better than headphones for detecting the slightest noise. He said he used Shure's E500 PTH for a long time. I note that because we use Shure microphones for this podcast, but he said that he had to switch to a model that actually has its audio cable detached because these ones did not, and he ran through a couple due to bad audio cables.
My recording studio professor would strangle this man to death if he heard him say that earphones are better than headphones.
Interesting. Like, he specifically mentioned, like, for the fact that if you want to hear, like, the slightest noises or, like, hisses, like, you gotta have it in your ear. That's so interesting.
He made a big deal at one point about how, like, in his words, he borrowed somebody's earbuds and was like, this isn't listening to music. And then he gave them back and, like, did this whole thing about how, like, no, you need headphones if you're mixing and doing work with stuff like this.
Okay, well, if you point out someone's, like, skull candy headphones, like, yeah, there's a difference there. Okay, sure.
He was very passionate about the fact that you use headphones when you do mixing. It was sure a thing.
Ryoma Nakamura's discography as a sound director includes starting off with Fatal Fury, Wild Ambition, and Athena, Awaking from the Ordinary Life, which is a King of Fighters spin-off for the original PlayStation. And that was at this Japan Vistech company. Then when he joined Chunsoft, he would do sound direction for Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, Explorers of Time, Darkness, and Sky. Of course, 9 Hours, 9 Persons, 9 Doors. Shiren the Wanderer, The Tower of Fortune, and the Dice of Fate, which has this crazy Japanese title. Of course, Zero Escape Virtue's Last Reward, Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, Gates to Infinity, Etrian Mystery Dungeon, the Somnium Files, and Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Rescue Team DX. So, assuming he's still a sound director over at Spike Chunsoft. The historical development research for the Virtue's Last Reward soundtrack, of course, Shinji Hosoe returned to create the music for the game. He was there for the first one. Let's bring him back to do the second one. Hosoe said, quote, the music for 999 used internal hardware, while VLR used streaming playback. This is where the schism begins. With that said, I think I got the best sound quality one could given the restrictions of the 3DS hardware. In VLR, my music was also influenced by the scenario, characters, and plot twists. The game's tracks are held together all by the tricks that I couldn't work into 999. As far as Nakamura's thoughts on how his day would kind of go about during Virtue's Last Reward's development, he would say that he'd check out the song that came up from Mr. Hosoe the night before. Most of the songs in the escape part were okay, but the event songs were often fine-tuned. I'm sorry for the many orders. He also says that he would work and trial and error the effect applied to Kei's voice. He says, if you put it too hard, Daisuke Ono's fans will get angry, so it's moderate. This would probably refer to the voice actor for Kei. Looking up Daisuke Ono's work, he is the voice of Jotaro Kujo in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Silver the Hedgehog, and Erwin Smith from Attack on Titan.
This is a hell of a way to find out that Jotaro Kujo and Silver the Hedgehog share a Japanese voice actor.
Yeah, the things you learn on Original Soundchat. Like how we'll get to the 5 critical tracks for Zero Escape, Virtue's Last Reward. And we'll start with the first track here. I think it's got to be this one. This is Virtue's Last Reward, Orchestra. For a song titled Virtue's Last Reward in a game called Virtue's Last Reward, you might think this is the main theme of the game, and you're right. In fact, the first half of this track is a dramatic orchestral interpretation of the song Morphogenetic Sorrow from 9 Hours, 9 Persons, 9 Doors, which was the main theme, so to speak, of that game. It's the main leitmotif for everything that goes on, especially at the end of that game. So it's a nice callback to include that. And then about halfway through this piece, the song transitions into a much more up-tempo track, a lot of drum and bass going into it, and it's synchronized with the visuals of the introductory cinematic, also like it does in 999. Also, then the song plays during the credits of the final character ending, and this is the clip that we use. It's the end of that piece. It's definitely one of the musical aspects I remember most from this game. Just a great sounding piece. There is a Virtue's Last Reward piano version, which kind of takes the first half into more of a piano interpretation of Morphogenetic Sorrow. So it's like very similar tracks, especially the end is very similar, but it's just, do you want the more dramatic orchestra versus the kind of lighter piano? But yeah, a great piece that kind of bookends the whole experience.
And it's really, really cool. I don't remember 100% what Morphogenetic Sorrow sounds like. Again, like you said earlier, that was 3 years ago. I don't remember. I don't even remember the games that I talked about 3 years ago. Except I do remember what was paired up with 999 for some reason. It was paired up with Luigi's Mansion, wasn't it?
It sure was, yeah.
That was on Halloween. Why do I remember that?
The memory works in strange ways, but yeah, it's a great bit of this da da dun dun da dun dun dun. It's a nice little piece.
I do know in general though this song is very, very good. And these are, for a 3DS game, not bad orchestral like midis. Not terrible.
Yeah, definitely. We're not streaming in recorded orchestras, but really strong midis, I think, especially for the time in the early 2010s. The next track on the Critical 5 for Virtue's Last Reward, there are so many to choose from because, as referenced earlier, each escape room gets its own theme. The one that resonates the most for me and that I remember the most is Lounge. Do you like drum and bass? Oh, then you'll really like this soundtrack. So, the track Lounge plays in the lounge.
Whoa.
I know! Crazy, right? A lot of the tracks are named for the room that they play in, so it's pretty easy that way. But the lounge is a pretty important room, as You as Sigma, you're exploring this environment with Phi and Luna, who are also really important characters in this group of 9. And it's in the first round of puzzles. So there's kind of like 3 rounds of puzzles in the whole game and how it all flow charts out from there. But for the first decision, you have these 3 chromatic doors that are cyan, yellow, and magenta. And so the lounge is one of the 3 initial choices that you can make. It's behind the magenta door. And it primarily has a bar that's like a prominent fixture in the lounge. That makes sense. But one of the big puzzles in it is that you have to like mix drinks to get different color fluids and then use that to access different parts of the room from there. So like that's definitely what I remember. This piece with the boom, boom, like that's a neat little musical bit that's like, this just brings back memories. And yeah, probably the best characters to explore a room with being Phi and Luna. So just it's tough to pick one, honestly, to represent the escape room gameplay and the environment and music that goes along with it. But Lounge is the one I choose.
I really, really like this song pretty much just because of that really, really rumbly bass.
Yes.
It's really good and makes it quite satisfying to listen to. I don't know. I just like the sinister sort of vibe that this song brings along. It's pretty good. It's really good.
I think it's a great example of how Hosoe like steps up his game based on the technology that's allowed in the transition from DS to 3DS. Because you could totally hear this kind of song being emulated on that DS sound chip. It would just sound a lot crunchier. But the better MIDIs allow for a fuller sound.
There also probably wouldn't be as much bass on a DS. Hell, there probably wasn't as much bass on a 3DS.
True.
But, you got to work with the speakers you have.
That's right. Yeah, we've talked about before on how like they have to factor in like, are you playing on headphones or are you having it come out of the 3DS speakers? So that's a whole thing. Same thing with DS. We get to number 3 on the Critical 5 and things are starting to be revealed. This is Clarification. Once again, we see the Ace Attorney tendrils kind of grip into a Japanese visual novel setup. This has a very explain the truth sort of feel to it, because for this track, Clarification, things are being explained. Whether it's the fallout of a big bombshell plot twist, or some crazy pseudoscientific theory that Uchikoshi has decided to work his way into the narrative and has to try to explain it in the simplest possible way for the player and how it affects either the puzzle or the game at large. So I feel like it has a good sort of in the mindset sort of feel to it with this doom da doom ba doo da doom ba doom ba doo da doom, and like you're kind of like doo doo doo, like diving into the mind and how to explain this thought process, or like how to explain or deal with the ramifications of what's just been revealed. It's good. We've explained or revealed this thing, and let's explore that a bit further with this music. And so a really important piece that you'll hear a lot in the game, and one that I feel like could not be put on anywhere but the Critical 5.
Yeah, I can 100% hear this being the song that plays when a character stares at me for 20 minutes to tell me about the simulation theory.
Yes.
Or, the meaning of Egyptian mythology things. It fits that vibe 100%. And I do like that it still keeps up that sort of tense atmosphere. I'm going to assume that is the case for pretty much most of this soundtrack in general, because it doesn't sound like there's a lot of room for joy or levity in the Zero Escape games. I don't know that for sure, but
I think you're right there. There's kind of always a horror undercurrent, or like there's death around the corner, whether it's through the result of the game or, a pandemic that may be running rampant throughout the station.
Oh, no!
Kind of feels a little close to home, doesn't it? Wow, dang. But yeah, this one I feel like is probably one of the brightest pieces because we're talking about science or, what does this mean? So you could also see it kind of making a use in the Somnium Files, I feel like, but it's Hosoe with not it being a dark Hosoe piece, if that makes any sense. Because if we get to a more dark and dismal Hosoe composed piece, that would be number 4 on the Critical 5 for Zero Escape Virtue's Last Reward. This is Demise. Demise, as it might suggest, plays during bad endings. This is the game over music, like the you done goofed kind of thing, except you need to experience a lot of bad endings. So it's not like it's a this is your fault player, but it's a good indication of like, this is kind of where this timeline ends. Like, just kind of brace yourself for it. You're going to be moving soon. And it fits really well because like there's this kind of heavy boom, like bass to it, and kind of like this, like a hopelessness, but also some hope to it. Like you're reaching a finality here, but don't stop now. Like keep moving on. There's even the bit of this da 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 da, like the kind of higher synths that come in, and that is a leitmotif coming back from Morphogenetic Sorrow, which makes sense in the grander scheme of things. So it's a really neat piece. And again, it's another, you will hear it a lot, but it's a good representation of, it's dark, it's heavy, bad end, but keep on going. There is more to explore.
I think this is up there as one of my favorites, honestly, on this Critical 5. Definitely fits even better when I know that it's the game over theme, though it's really, I'm not used to game over themes being this complex. I mean, it's not like super complex, but it's more than I would expect of a game over theme. It also feels very PS2 era.
Sure.
Like it sounds like it's from a PS2 game, and that's really interesting for a game from this time period, honestly.
We'll wrap things up on the Critical 5 for Virtue's Last Reward with the song that had to be here. It's the enduring theme, if you will, from this game, and that would be Bluebird Lamentation. Bluebird Lamentation is generally seen as Luna's theme, as she sees herself as like a bluebird, and so it plays during her ending. It also plays during some of the heaviest and saddest emotional parts of the game, so the feels are turned up for this one. Luna is also a very important character in the game, especially when you consider her role and who she is in the third game, in Zero Time Dilemma. So it was definitely a musical theme and a rallying cry for Operation Bluebird. So this had to be here. This is a really key one. It's also Shinji Hosoe's favorite piece that he composed for this game. He says, quote, "This piece has special meaning for me. The song was supposed to play from a small music box, which only gave me 2 octaves. I went overboard at first, but streamlined the music box sections. I put all my heart into the latter half. It feels like something is crushing your chest before suddenly flying away. And so the piece starts with just this simple melody on music box. And then as it swells into the clip that we showed, it's this big orchestration, but it also keeps that music box undercurrent and just this boom, like the bass that comes in for like the drums and the timpani rolling in, like crashes there. Just great stuff. It's a simple melody, but it's very effective.
And I'm glad he kept the music box stuff because it's my favorite part. It works so well up against the sort of orchestrated swells and all that. I can hear this being part of an emotional sort of reveal or something like that. So I look forward to finding out context for that one of these days. Because I feel like that would probably make me, like, this is a very good song. I feel like the context would probably make me appreciate it even more, honestly.
Yeah, and I don't want to sell it too much, but I feel like if there's moments that'll be a tearjerker in that game, I think it's that storyline and played with this music. So it's good at pulling those emotions. For tracks on the cutting room floor, I have two. The first one is Ambidexterity. Ambidexterity. That's a clever name for the Ambidex edition of the Nonary games, the AB game. This plays in the elevator, which is the first puzzle of the game, kind of teaches you the basics of the escape room. And this elevator also becomes the Ambidex room, where you play the AB game, whether you ally or betray and make that decision with the teammates there. So not only is it just an initial piece, one of the first pieces you'll hear actually during gameplay, but since you're going to be playing it during each AB game, the lead up to it, the drama, the tension, like, will you ally? Will you betray? What's the ramifications? Make your choice. You're going to be hearing this one a lot. And it's a good thing it's one of the best pieces in the game, I think. But at the same time, it's also a newer take on the track Nonary Game from 9 Hours, 9 Persons, 9 Doors, which was the escape room theme that you heard during the first escape room in that game. So it's a good callback and bringing that in with these newer instruments. You do hear a lot of the original DS kind of instrument playing in a little bit in the background. So it's a nice through line there for Hosoe. A great piece, I think, an important one. I just couldn't really get it to crack the critical 5, but it's really the carryover from 999 that kind of brought it, at least had to be mentioned on the cutting room floor.
For some reason, I hear this song and all I can think is this sounds like a classic Resident Evil boss theme or chase theme. Like, that's what it feels like. What is it with Spike Chunsoft and putting people on elevators before tense moments?
It's an easy box to literally put them in.
Like, they really love doing that, I guess. I don't think Somnium Files has any of that, but that's like a whole scene type in Danganronpa.
That's true. Also, characters that are just not the coolest. Makoto Naegi in Danganronpa, not the coolest. Sigma in this game, not the coolest. I don't know if he's as big of a dork as Kaname Date, but Sigma, not an interesting or charismatic protagonist.
Man, I'm really excited to find out what you think about Date.
Should be a good time. Let's get to the other one on the cutting room floor here. This is Pantry. Again, as you might expect, Pantry plays in the pantry. It's the escape room that you explore with Alice and Clover after going through the red door that happens to follow the lounge, actually, when you go through the magenta door. And this ends up being Dio's story path and how you can reach the Dio ending. Because, you go through one door and then, you get to make another choice of 3 options. You go through the red door, Do you go through the green door or you go through the blue door? Very, very interesting. Branches. Many, many branches of stories. So in the pantry, there are a bunch of different shelves of food rations. There's a large water tank with a touchscreen computer. And it makes you think like, oh, we're kind of here to bunker down, and these are what we can use to survive if we had to. Interesting. One of the several puzzles that is required to escape involves like pH balancing with the water. So go figure. You learn a little bit of science too along the way with acidity and base and all that. This is one of Shinji Hosoe's favorite pieces in the game, besides Bluebird Lamentation, obviously. And also, Uchikoshi likes it because at this point in the game, he has Clover read the room sign as panty. And they all have a laugh about it.
Yeah, it checks out.
Yeah, this makes sense when you know of Uchikoshi's writing. So, if they like it, and it's a really nice song, there are some noises that play that definitely ratchet up the tension. That high-pitched kind of whine that's going through it definitely sets you on edge, but that's the point.
Definitely isn't the kind of song you think of when somebody says it's called Pantry. I'll say that much. This doesn't seem like the place I want to do my cooking or keep my ingredients. I guess you don't cook in the pantry. You keep stuff in there. You know what I mean. I
think there's a kitchen as well. So you get the food out, you bring it to the kitchen. I don't know. But yeah, you're right. It's a different feel, but Hosoe likes this one a lot. It's like, yeah, it's simple, but I'm really liking it. It feels pretty effective. So what will I never forget about Zero Escape Virtue's Last Reward? Some people did knock it in critical reviews, but the twists in this game go hard. And they get more complex than they probably should be. But I feel like, for me, like this game is a top 10 all-timer as far as its narrative wrenches. For me, it's the most complex narrative I've ever played in a game. And, take that for what you will. Also, this is a very difficult list to make. There were tracks like Monitor, Strain, Placidity, and Confession that could also have been on the cutting room floor. So there's that. It's just a great soundtrack. But it is also the peak of the franchise. Like Zero Time Dilemma is not better. It's questionable if all the big narrative ideas at play here even get wrapped up in a satisfying way from it. I'm glad that it wasn't left hanging, but for me, this is the game of the franchise I'll remember the most. I've platinumed it on Vita. I think I've played through most of it again on 3DS. Like it's a great experience, and I hope you get to try it eventually, Joe.
When you talk about like the complex narrative and like the reasons you like this game, hey man, you should play 13 Sentinels.
It does make me think of that too. Like as far as like a game recently that's tried to live up to that complexity, I think you're right. 13 Sentinels is one that tries to go for that throne. Well, I didn't know we were ever going to get an Uchikoshi themed episode, but Kotaro Uchikoshi, eat your heart out. We've got the Somnium Files. We have Zero Escape Virtue's Last Reward. Talking about these games, their soundtracks, it's just a fun time. I feel like if we had both played either of them or both, I'd make for a great spoiler discussion, but maybe that'll be sometime later down the line. For now, that will do it for us this week on Original Soundchat. You can find me on Twitter at PeteSpeakeasy. Joe is over at StringPixel. The video version of the show is on the Rhymes with Asia YouTube channel, but it's that MP3 podcast version that you want, and that's hosted by Anonymous Dinosaur at anondino.squarespace.com. That's where Joe's other podcast, Smash Your Pieces, is hosted, and you can find Smash Your Pieces and Original Soundchat wherever you get your podcasts. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, even on Spotify, where we have a feed of podcast episodes, but we also have a Spotify playlist, where if we talk about a video game track on this show and it's on Spotify, it gets added to this monster playlist. Joe, anything added to that playlist this week?
So Somnium Files is on Spotify, but Virtue's Last Reward is not. Fun fact, Nirvana Initiative also immediately appeared on Spotify, so thanks, Spike Johnsoff.
Thank you, but also dig back in your archive a little bit, because would be a great soundtrack to have playing on Spotify and going through all of that. Well, when you're done listening, you can find the show on social media at Soundchat OST. You can leave some feedback for us. How are we doing with these episodes? Also, suggestions for games that you'd like us to cover in the future. All right, Joe, who are we talking about next week?
Next week, I will be talking about Miki Higashino.
I will be talking about Ramin Djawadi. Oh, yeah. Oh, he's done some games. He's also done a lot more than that, so it's good to finally get to a big composer currently working in the industry. All right, to play us out, it's got to be a cover of Bluebird Lamentation for a fan to cover it on YouTube or OC Remix, wherever. It has to be this song, right? What's your take on it? Oh, what's that? Kan Gao, creator of To the Moon and A Bird Story and Finding Paradise and Imposter Factory. Kan Gao, you also compose music. You play the piano. Oh, you wrote A Bird Story, so Bluebird Lamentation hit you, didn't it? Okay. So Kan Gao on his YouTube channel is playing this bird-related theme on his keyboard that is set on a music box-like instrument. I think that's just such a cool thing where this piece, really affects this indie developer and musician, and we obviously love his work. So please enjoy that. Thank you so much for listening this week on Original Soundchat. We'll see you next time. Take care.